All right, what's up, guys? We've got another episode of the Growth by Shawn podcast. I'm here with Ted Zimnicki today. Ted, how are you?
Doing fantastic, Shawn. Thanks for having me.
Good, I got you. No worries. So, Ted, I had met in this past December at a coaching conference, and he is the owner of High Note Performance. And I'm just gonna let you give a little brief synopsis, however long or short you want to make it, a little bit about you and uh, the business, however you want to take it. So you can start wherever and end wherever. It's
For
it's the
sure.
floor is yours.
For sure. Well, I suppose I'll give you the medium length bio,
Mhm.
and we can sort of feel free to ask questions and pick things apart as we go. Uh, so yeah, Shawn, like you mentioned, I am the owner of High Note Performance. We're a virtual fitness facility. We're headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, but we're wherever the internet exists. So as long as you've got a decent connection and a good attitude, then we can help you out potentially. I co-own the business with my wife Miriam, who you also met briefly. She wasn't
Mhm.
able to be here today. She's off, actually running the business while I get to have cool conversations with cool people. Uh, so I suppose what we talked a little bit before the podcast, and I think it's valuable for you and for folks to know kind of how I got into this and how I became, the person I am and all that
Yeah, please. Yeah.
stuff. So I grew up morbidly obese. I was heavy for
Mhm.
as long as I can remember. Heavy is the nice way to put it, right? I was fat
Mhm.
for as long as I can remember. And it kind of hit a peak at when I was 19 years old. So still relatively young, but old enough to know better. And I was in music school at the time. So that's part of the reason why we're called High Note, right? Because my wife and I are both musicians,
Mhm.
both singers, and we do a lot of work with stage performers. So actors, singers, dancers, instrumentalists, all that great stuff. But we'll help anyone who needs help. So I was in music school and I stepped on a scale just to check, like you do sometimes. Uh, and I stepped on it, my bathroom scale, and it broke. Literally, I stepped on it and I heard a pop from inside the scale, and it wouldn't weigh me, it wouldn't tell me what the number was. Found out later that scale only went up to 350 pounds. And I was north of that. I never found out what my top weight was, but it was somewhere above 350. But that wasn't enough to get me to change my life, change my identity. So I forget exactly the timeline on this, but I'll just say, later, I was going to class. I was wearing a button down shirt like you do sometimes. And I was going to sit into one of those like chair desk combo things, right? I'm sure we've all seen these.
Mhm.
But I was going to sit down and like something out of a cartoon, the bottom two buttons on my shirt just popped off when I squat down to sit in the chair. And that was horribly embarrassing, of course. Uh, I remember getting like super red in the face. Like it was enough that people noticed,
Mhm.
right? It was not like a subtle, like people noticed what was going on. And I was just paralyzed with fear and embarrassment in that moment. So I'm literally sitting there in a 90-minute class with my belly hanging out over my pants. Uh, but that also wasn't enough for me. The kind of the final nail in the coffin, the final straw in my case was I was singing in a master class. And for anyone listening who might not know, in the musical world, a master class is when you get up and you sing a piece that you've prepared for a visiting teacher, right? Someone who's never met you before, someone who you've never met before. But usually when you're if you're giving a master class, you have some notoriety behind you. Like people in the business know who you are, but I'm a 19-year-old kid. Nobody knows who I am at this moment.
Mhm.
So I get up there and I sing. And the visiting teacher, whose name I won't tell you, uh, says, "Hey, you sing just fine, but you're never going to get hired being so fat. Master classes are public.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
anyone who wants to can come." And this one was pretty well attended because this dude had a big name.
Mhm.
Uh, so he called me out in front of my friends, my colleagues, my classmate, my girlfriend at the time, who's now become my wife. Somehow, I don't know how I managed that one, but I did. Uh, and that shattered me, just completely and utterly shattered. You know, once though, I managed to work my way through that with a lot of help. I am a huge proponent of mental health, talking to your friends, getting that stuff out there. Professional therapy, if you need it. I've done that many, many times in my life. It's been transformational for me, going and having those conversations with professionals. But once I got through that, and I can't believe how lucky I was that I also had some friends who were willing to sort of take me under their wing and help me start getting in shape. And they took me to the gym on campus. And I found a whole new way of expressing myself, where before I only had this one outlet of music, and that was kind of tarnished for me by this experience that I had with this person. And so, like, after that, it was really hard for me to sing in public. It's still hard for me to sing in public sometimes. This is like probably 13, 14 years later. And I mean, I made a career as an opera singer. I was singing, I've sung internationally, and it was great, but every single time I would still have that thought in the back of my head years later, more than a decade later. And they took me under their wing, and I started to, just do what I now know are the very basics, move more, eat better. And I started to slowly change. And my identity started to change as well. It took a long time, and there was not like a defining moment in that. But through doing that, I've managed to lose over 130 pounds. Like I said, I don't know my top weight, but now I live somewhere around 220 pounds. So going from 350, there's 130. I'm also now a nationally ranked strength competitor. I compete in strongman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm not ranked very highly, but
Yep.
I am. And going from, morbidly obese to a strength competitor was huge. It transformed my life in every possible way, mostly for the good. I think all for the good, but
Yeah.
there might be some who disagree, and maybe we can get into that. But the identity shift and just the way you have to go about thinking your way through life, through each individual decision, the way that you choose to spend all of your hours was a huge transformation for me. And now I spend my day talking to people who have not yet made that transition, and helping them see the path, and helping them see how amazing it is on the other side of whatever wall or mental barrier they've been struggling with.
Yeah, it's an amazing story to just hear. I would have loved to like be someone in your life that I could witness this transformation that you had gone through, but now you just get to tell the tale of it. And it's very cool, I mean, it's great that you're alive and healthy. And then two, that you just get to share this and help others do the same thing if that's what they're looking to do now as well. Where I would love to start the conversation going, what I'm most interested is, why do you think it took you until that external like motivation, I guess I'll say, in order to start your change, as opposed to some of the internal things like the scale breaking, like that's just an internal like kind of shame that you may have experienced, or in class, like all that embarrassment that's still just internal thoughts of embarrassment. Why do you think it took until that external moment in order for you to start making that change?
I think that's a great question for sure. And I wish I had a succinct, clear answer for you.
Yeah.
But what jumped to my head initially is, when I was 19, I was not very self-aware, right? And I didn't really have a good sense of how I presented myself and how other people may have perceived me. And so, when it's just me alone in the bathroom and I step on the scale and it breaks, like no one else sees that. So I'm like, no, I carry it well. I might
Yeah.
be 350 pounds, but I'm also pretty tall, and I dress myself in a way that hides it. Like, I carry it well. It's fine. I don't really need to. And then the same kind of thing in class, right? Like, oh, that was just a fluke. It could happen to anybody. Maybe my shirt got bunched up in the back, and so when I sat down, it caught on the desk and it popped off. Yeah, it's fine. Could have happened to anybody. It's fine.
Yeah. That's just kind of continue. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. But then
Yeah.
when someone who I had never met before, who had never seen me before, and was judging me honestly, purely off of what he saw, in that moment was like, yeah, no, this is a problem for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, okay, so I guess I don't wear it that well.
Mm.
I guess I don't actually hide it that well. Because other than that, like my life was pretty good. I had a loving girlfriend. I had friends. I was more or less successful in school. So there was just sort of this one area that I wasn't really on top of it, I guess. And this other
Mm-hmm.
person, this teacher pointing it out, which in the moment, it was one of the worst moments of my life, but now, almost 15 years later, it's probably one of the better ones
Mm-hmm.
because that was the thing that spurred me to take action.
Mm. I would love to hear about how you feel about this person that called you out to this day. Like some of the thoughts that you may
Yeah.
have on a yearly, weekly, daily basis, if any.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've done a couple of podcasts recently and told this story,
Okay.
and my feelings are extremely mixed, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I remember like vividly in the moment, just incredible anger and uh, I don't use this word lightly, but like actual hatred and fire
Mm-hmm.
inside, and that took me a long time to get through. And there's still some of that exists, right? If I let
Mm-hmm.
myself go there, then that would absolutely happen, and it could absolutely take over. Um, but through my own sort of mental health journey and being able to be self-aware enough to have some detachment about the situation. uh, and gosh, we could spend a decade talking about how important detachment can be sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to be detached from it and seeing the actual result from it, I have to be grateful
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, because if that hadn't happened, when you're 350 at 19, it's not that, like, the chances of you making it to a healthy 30 or a healthy 35, or the chances of you making it to 60 at all are not that big. It's possible, but it's not that big. This might turn me into an asshole, but there's not that many fat old people.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not.
Well, it's true. I mean, I think that we don't want to talk about it sometimes because of all of this body positivity movements
Right.
and things like that, which I think can be helpful, but also detrimental from my personal view, which some may agree with, some may not, and that's okay. We're supposed to all have different views on things. But as long as you're healthy and can get around and move around, then I think that most people will be all right. But I mean, if you're just overweight and you're unhealthy, that's where it starts to, from my perspective, be like, okay, why are you lying to yourself and making excuses about it? You know,
Yeah,
that's
you
where I come from and see it from the outside.
yeah, you mentioned body positivity there, and I think it's important. I think my definition of body positivity is different from most, because I
Hmm.
but I do believe that it's necessary, right? I do
Okay.
believe that you should have some degree of body positivity, and really, I think that means self-love,
Hmm.
right? Because you should love yourself and you should love your body.
Hmm.
But it's a very often difficult balance to strike. This paradox is really difficult to strike between ambition and contentment,
Okay.
because no matter how much you love your body, no matter, and this expands to beyond just your body, no matter how much you love any individual aspect of your life, it can always be a little bit better.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so the self-love that I think is the most productive, is the most valuable, is you need to have, or this is how I think of it, right?
Hmm.
I need to have more love for myself in 6 months than I do for myself today.
Okay.
And I need to love the future version of myself more than I do today, more than the current version of myself today. And that's one of the ways that I get myself to do hard things, like
Hmm.
hard things that I know we're going to pay off, like
Hmm.
exercise, like eat properly. Would I love to go to Costco and buy all the cookies? And of course I would, right? Who wouldn't?
Hmm.
That sounds delicious. I love food,
Yeah.
but I don't, because one, in the short term, it's going to give me a big old belly ache, and that's not going to be
Mm.
fun. But it's more because I care more about the future version of Ted, and I have so much I had so much love for that guy that short-term discomfort, passing up something that is delicious in the short term, not a big deal, because it's going to pay off in the long run. Delay that gratification and it'll be greater in the end.
Yeah, when I hear that, it makes me think a lot about um when I hear something like that, especially for you, or when I see that in myself, what I think of is being your own hero. Like if I was to ask you the question of who is your hero, I feel you may give me the answer of me in 6 months or me in 1 year. And that's who you're trying to help in a sense, is or look up to. It not help, but look up to
Sure.
is the future version of you. That's what I think of when I hear that story from you. So, what I would also love to touch base on is when you were about 19 or so, or even a little bit younger than that, it doesn't have to be super specific, but what were some of the thoughts that what were some of the ways that you talked to yourself, and how did they start to change leading up to where you are now?
Great question. Um, to be 100% honest, I don't remember.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you the exact words that
Yeah.
I used, but I'm sure my self-talk was incredibly negative,
Hmm.
right? I mean, we're always our own worst critic, right?
Hmm.
And if I would never talk to someone else the way that I talk to myself or talked
Hmm.
to myself, I should put that in past tense.
Hmm.
But it took very specific action and a lot of meditation and a lot of work with friends and therapists to go, okay, this is just a thought, and who is responsible for my thoughts? Well, I am.
Hmm.
So can I notice a thought rather than believing it?
Hmm.
Okay, cool, I can do that. Great. Can I change a thought? Well, okay, maybe, but noticing a thought as it comes through and as it goes on uh,
Hmm.
or has turned out to be an incredibly valuable skill for me, and it's really helped me keep my cool in some otherwise potentially stressful, dangerous situations, uh, where instead of getting wrapped up in a thought, letting the emotion take over and sending me into a downward spiral,
Hmm.
which hell, over the course of the last 10 years or so, even on this weight loss journey, I kind of hate that phrase, but I can't come up
Hmm.
with a better one.
Yeah.
uh, I've definitely had roadblocks and pit stops and some spirals, but the ability to notice a thought and credit it as just a thought,
Hmm.
not an overwhelming force, is super valuable. So when I still have those those bits of negative self-talk, hell, I had one this morning. I was working out in the gym, and a particular lift was more difficult than I thought it should have been, right? And I
Hmm.
called myself weak in my head. Like, well, okay, that's there, and I can choose what to do with it. I can choose how to interpret it. It's either I'm weak and I'm worthless, or uh, I'm weak and I can do something about it.
Hmm.
And if we want to talk about motivation, which I am always down to talk about motivation,
Hmm.
the you can be motivated by anything if you choose to let it motivate you and let it spur you into action.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of people think that they need to have so much love, and that they need to, like, you can only be motivated by a drive forward, like by something positive as it continues. And I think that is an awesome motivation if you have it.
Hmm.
But I think it forces a lot of people, or it makes a lot of people trick themselves into not doing anything because they don't know that they're going to love the result.
Hmm.
So rather than knowing or feeling like you're going to love the result at the end, or you're going to love the process or any of that stuff,
Hmm.
instead, just start doing stuff.
Hmm.
Like if you're a beginner in fitness, and I'll say beginner means you're overweight, you may be obese, you haven't been training regularly for an extended period of time.
Hmm.
Extended might be 6 months, might be a year, it varies, right? But that's the time frame we're looking at. If you do something, it's going to be a million times better than the nothing that you're doing right now.
Hmm. I
And I think
think,
that's career wise too. Just do something.
yeah. I think what happens is we look at this, just like you were saying, the journey or the destination of where we want to go. And in our mind, we become overwhelmed by how large the task looks. So by just taking those small steps, that's how you begin, and that's how you eventually get to that destination. But what would you look at, like if someone came to you and they're having trouble even making the first step?
Yeah.
That's where like a lot of people um are lacking is just the initial first step. What are some of the things or the ways that you communicate to them or um ways that you try to connect with them to help them take that first step?
Yeah. That's a very interesting and specific conversation. Uh,
Mm,
that honestly I love having, and it's something
mm-hmm,
that I do multiple times per day on my good days. Um, I think the best sort of way I can sum it up is, you know who Usain Bolt is, right?
mm-hmm,
He's a pretty quick guy for
mm,
anyone who might not know. He was a world record holder in the 100 meter, the 200 meter, and I believe the 400 meter at the same time. He won more than 5 gold medals in a single Olympics. I might be getting some of those specifics wrong, but
mm-hmm,
he's pretty damn fast on the track. Uh, Across the finish line for him is money, is legacy, is gold medals, potentially power. Uh, all of these wonderful things that he wants are just past the finish line. And he's going to run pretty damn fast to get there. He's motivated to get there. He's going to make it happen. And that's the positive side of motivation. But I bet that even as fast as he is, he would run a little bit quicker and a little bit harder if there was a damn lion coming up from behind him.
mm-hmm,
Right? So maybe his world record would be, a tenth of a hundredth of a second faster, or 200, or I don't know. I compete in strongman. Track is very different from strongman. So,
mm-hmm.
but it's the ability to have at least one of those things. In a perfect world, you'd have both of those things. You'd have the great thing at the finish line and the terrifying thing at the start line. And guess where you are right now? You're at the start line.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the cost of not moving? In this
Everything.
metaphor, the cost is the lion eats you and you die.
Mm-hmm.
But in an individual's life, uh, like this, I talked to a lot of moms recently.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow this has happened, and I spoke to
Okay.
one yesterday, uh, where she said, "Yeah, I've got 3 kids. I'm 70 pounds overweight, and I've been overweight for the last 10 or 15 years." And we had this conversation. I said, "Okay, uh, what's motivating you to make this happen?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was a deep and in-depth conversation. I won't go into super amounts of detail just for
Yeah.
time's sake. But essentially, she felt like if she did nothing, she would be a horrible mom to her 3 kids and a horrible wife to her husband. And she had been doing nothing for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that we really had to do was lay the facts at her feet and say, this is what the habits that you have resulted in the body that you have. You
Mm-hmm.
always get what you deserve
Mm-hmm.
through the way that you move and you think and you act. You always get what you deserve. There's no way around that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, having a physique that looks a certain way is a huge status symbol, because there's no way to cheat that. You
Mm-hmm.
have to move a certain way. You have to eat a certain way. You have to sleep a certain way. Like all of these things have to be in line for you to get to a certain level of physique.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is true if you want to be 100 pounds overweight. You're not going to accidentally get there. You're
Mm-hmm.
only going to get there on purpose. You might not set the purpose, but it's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen through the habits that you have,
Mm-hmm.
through the actions that you take. So I just laid this down at her feet, and I said, I won't use her name. We'll call her Mrs.
Mm-hmm.
Jones.
Yeah.
Said, Mrs. Jones, you've been saying that you want to do this, that you need to do this for the last 5 years. Why
Mm-hmm.
haven't you? Well, this reason and that reason, that reason. Okay, those are all excuses,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those are all things that you could have worked through or worked past, but really, why haven't you? And it always comes down to some type of fear, right?
Mm,
Fear of trying and failing, or even fear of succeeding and having to rebuild their identity, rebuild their life. When
hmm
someone is a certain way for so long, it becomes part of their identity.
hmm
That's scary to try and change.
It's very, very true. I mean, think about someone, um, the best way that I can interpret that, from my point of view, is someone that perhaps drinks a lot, right? And the hardest people to convince that you have a new identity is your family. Like Easter's coming up soon. Like, let's say in high school or something, you were a big drinker and you were always the one that was drinking at the family party and the life of the party. And now you don't drink. And people are like, oh, what's wrong with you? Things like this. There's all these different judgments that come, but you have changed your identity, but these people do not know that you have changed your identity, but you know, and now you're on a mission to almost convince them.
It's a
So
great metaphor.
yeah. So what I would love to hear now is why do you think that it takes us to have to reach out to someone in order for us to face these fears that we have? Why is it so difficult for us to face our own fears without coming to someone else and just having them walk through these steps with us? Does that make sense? Does that make sense of a question?
I think so, and I think it's because fear is scary,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're everyone would rather, I think at least,
Mm-hmm.
everyone would rather face something new and scary with someone who has been there and done it.
Mm, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I mean, is it possible to work through these issues on your own? Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as like losing weight and fitness goes, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure, 100%. All the
Mm-hmm.
information that you need is, at your fingertips. We've all
Mm-hmm.
got the internet in our pocket. You can ask Chat GPT to write you a 3-day week fitness program, and it'll write you a damn good one,
Yeah.
right? But having access to information, access to knowledge is no longer the limiting factor for the human race.
Mm.
It's just not.
Yes.
We have
Mm-hmm.
unlimited information at zero cost, the
Mm-hmm.
cost of the internet connection, whatever that is. You
Mm-hmm.
go to the library, you can use their internet for free, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we have unlimited knowledge, essentially, but what we don't have is unlimited action,
Mm-hmm.
unlimited will,
Mm-hmm.
unlimited. I almost said unlimited potential, and I think our potential is probably unlimited, but it's really the chutzpah essentially to put like get in the car, step on the pedal, let the rubber meet the road, and rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's part like as humans, we're so much about instant gratification. We want the
Mm-hmm.
thing and we want it now.
Mm-hmm.
We're the what's that phrase I heard? The Amazonification of life, right? 2-day
Okay.
delivery, even faster in some locations now, right? You
Mm.
click a button, it's on your doorstep by the end of the day, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a major flaw most of the time that
Mm-hmm.
you're not good at doing long duration, low intensity effort. Long duration can be years.
Mm-hmm.
Low intensity effort can be working out a couple of times a week. It's because we want it all and we want it all now.
Yeah.
So going into a scary, potentially stressful situation with someone who has been doing it for a long time and someone who has walked other people through it many, many times before, like, of course, that gives you peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
That makes you a little bit more calm and makes you more ready,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, to face a new scary situation.
Mm-hmm. So from my perspective, I find that the world is going to continue to like this is going to be the modernization. That's a lengthy word for me, but a hard word to pronounce sometimes. But as this world, we have more and more access to instant gratification. How can we, and I don't want to overuse the word detach that you have already softly spoken on, but that's the best word that I can come up with right now, unless you have a better definition. But all these ways that we have instant gratification towards many, many things in our life, How can we detach ourselves from that now, especially moving forward as it's going to keep evolving?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it will just continue to go that way. And I think eventually fitness will go that way too. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you're already seeing the signs of some of it, like weight loss drugs are
Mm,
now a thing, in a way, in a bigger way than they've ever been before.
mm-hmm.
But those are weight loss drugs; those aren't muscle building drugs. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
see what happens there. Steroids already exist, but you still got to work out for steroids.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think what's the only way that we do it is by recognizing the value in being the type of person that is willing to wait and willing to work without the praise and willing to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you put in the hours and you put in the time that's really necessary to get the things that you want. At the same time, I'm part of the modern world, right? I love
Mm-hmm.
shortcuts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love, like, getting things when I want them, how I want them.
Mm-hmm.
And when a weight loss drug comes out that's safe and effective and reasonably priced and all of that stuff, I think it's going to be transformative for a huge number of people in
Mm-hmm.
a brilliant way. But there's always going to be something that is unattainable without that level of work.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's fitness, whether it's business, whether it's relationships
Mm-hmm.
as well, there's no pill for a happy relationship
Mm-hmm.
yet. Maybe there never will be. I don't know. Or maybe it's around the corner. Uh, there, the ability to work to a certain level
Mm-hmm.
is always going to be the most valuable trait that any human could ever possess.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, did I answer your question? I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, that answers it enough for me. I mean, I understand that it's not supposed to be just a clear cut answer. There's not, like, I'm basically asking you for a solution to an impossible problem.
Sure.
That was more or less what I was asking you. Um, as we start to wrap up here, something new that I'm going to start doing. This is actually the first podcast that I'm going to do this, and I'm taking this from another podcast. I was listening to Diary of a CEO. He had done a podcast with Alex Hormozy, which I listened to a lot of Alex's content. He had asked Alex as one of the ending questions for a question for him to ask the next person that would come on. So now I am going to ask you for a question that you can come up with that I will be asking the next person on the podcast.
Okay. Well, without knowing who the next person is,
Hmm.
I think that's a challenge.
It
I'm going to do
is.
my best to
I have many, many different people that come on, and I am honored to speak to. So,
yeah, yeah. Man, a question for an unknown person. That's
hmm,
a tough one, Shawn. You can tell
yeah.
I'm stalling as I try and think of an answer by complimenting how great of a question that is. And
Well, I mean, while you think about it, because I had listened to this and I was like, that is an awesome idea. Like, I was just very inspired by it. And I'm letting people know, like, this is not my idea. Like, I'm taking this from someone else. This was just such a cool idea to me. I'm like, I want to start doing that. Like, that sounds awesome, and
yeah,
I'm going to test it for a couple weeks and see what happens, see what kind of questions I get. And, the next person that comes on, um, who do I have scheduled? I do th no, I'm not going to give anything
yeah.
away
Don't don't
because,
don't tell me in
you
case I
know,
never do.
yeah, but yeah, it's
Uh,
it's tough. So whenever you're ready.
yeah. Gosh, can we like cut here and I'll get back to you in a week like that?
Well, I
um,
mean,
no, of course not.
you're big on we talked about detachment and motivation as those two, I'll just say buzzwords in terms of very popular, but you're very passionate about those two subject matters. So what about something that has to do with those two things?
Yeah, I mean the immediate question that jumps to mind is just why,
Okay.
right? Because that's one of those questions that can be asked in any situation, and it's always a good question.
Mm-hmm.
But without context, it's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, maybe the version of yourself that has accomplished all of your goals,
Hmm.
has all the things that you want, and lives in the place that you want and does the things that you want, what how does that person see themselves 5 years from now?
Wow. Okay. They are in for a doozy for the next for their last question of their episode. So Ted, I really appreciate you coming on. Um, if it's all right with you, why don't you just give us where we can find you and how we can uh work with you if we're interested.
Absolutely. So I'm on all the social medias, right? Facebook and Instagram for the most part. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/HNPerf, PERF. On Instagram at high note underscore performance. You can find the website, of course, at highnoteperformance.fit. Make sure you go to .fit. If you go to highnoteperformance.com, you will find a motorcycle apparel company in New Delhi. Uh, I wish I had known that earlier, but too little, too late. Or of course, you can email me at ted@highnoteperformance.fit. Uh, and this was a blast. I love talking to you, Shawn. This is great.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it, Ted. All right. That's all for us today. All right. Thanks, guys.